trust everyone here knows the work of saxophonist, composer, arranger Benny Golson. He came up in Philadelphia. Yeah. I hope so. He came up in Philadelphia during a particularly fruitful time for musicians in that city. He graduated from Howard University here in Washington, D.C., went on to work with Tad Dameron, Dizzy Gillespie, Art Blakey, and others. With his friend and partner, Art Farmer, he formed the successful quintet known as the Jazz Tet. When he heard that Clifford Brown had perished in an automobile accident, he wrote his beautiful ballad, I Remember Clifford, not to mention his other jazz standards, Stablemates, Killer Joe, Whisper Not, Blues March, and Along Came Buddy. In the 1960s, he wrote music for various television programs, and he's received many prestigious awards, including the Jazz Masters Award from the National Endowment for the Arts. Please welcome back to Washington, D.C., Mr. Benny Golson.
Thank you.
Our other special guest for the evening is Jonathan Kane, himself a photographer, drummer, and composer, and the son of the photographer who snapped this iconic image called Harlem 1958, sometimes called A Great Day in Harlem. As a musician, maybe you know his work with Lamont Young, Reese Chatham, the Swans, and John Zorn, among others. Please help me welcome Jonathan Kane.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It's a really real pleasure to be here.
I know Jonathan has a PowerPoint he'd like to show to introduce us to the work of his father. Jonathan.
Well, we're going to just get started with the classic image. This is the frame that Art Kane chose that became known as Harlem 1958. A Great Day in Harlem is its second name now, but that's in fact the title of Gene Bach's 1995 documentary film, brilliantly edited by Susan Peel, and that tells the story, tells some of the story of the day that my father created this picture. Before I go too much further, I just want to say quickly that I want to thank Claudia Morales and Ann McLean and everybody here at Library of Congress. It's a real honor to be here, and furthermore, it's a real honor to share the stage with Mr. Benny Golson. It's just an amazing experience. Thank you.
I had no idea what was happening on the day that this picture was taken. I got a call from Nat Hintoff to come and take a picture, and I thought I would go there and click and go home. When I got there, I saw all of this, and I certainly had no idea that all of this today would be happening. Fantastic.
So what was your reaction when you first saw all of these people standing on the street?
Why was I there? I was a new boy in town. Nobody knew me. Well, Dizzy Gillespie knew me because I was playing with his band. Who else did I know? Art Farmer, who was standing by, and G.G. Grice. 2 weeks later, he was my best man at my wedding. And Sonny Rollins, just a few people, but I wasn't really known.
So 10 a.m. call is an odd time for nocturnal musicians to meet. How did you find out about the shoot? So Nat Hentoff told you about it. Was this a unique undertaking, this particular photo?
Extremely. Yeah. 10 o'clock, I thought that I was going to be there and maybe a couple of other people. But it turned out like this. I don't know why, but I'm glad it did.
Didn't someone mention in the documentary that they didn't think there were two 10 o'clocks in one day? That's true. Yeah, I think that one of the reasons for such an early call time was wanting to catch the light. You wait a little too long into the afternoon, and if it's a sunny day, in the case of this photograph, it was a kind of an overcast day, which was actually very beneficial for photography. Photographers love a good overcast day, particularly shooting in black and white, because you don't have harsh shadows, and you can literally saturate the film for your optimal blacks and whites. But I think the idea was just to get an early call time because figuring it would take a little time to get everyone together. Although, to be honest, they weren't really sure at the time, how many people would show up. And I suppose we should just backtrack for a second to talk about how it all came to be.
Sure.
If that's okay. So in the summer of 1958, my father, Art Kane, was not yet a professional photographer. The legend has it that this was his first picture, and I'm going to do a little bit of myth busting on that. It is true that it was his first fully fledged professional assignment. At the time, he was an art director, had been a successful young-ish art director in New York City for about 10 years after he got out of the Army for World War II. He was working, he did some page layouts at Esquire. He was art director at 17 magazine. And at the time, he was employed by a kind of a Mad Men era New York City agency called the Irving Surwert Agency. But he was restless. He wanted to be the person making the images and not the person laying the images out on the page. So he had actually been shooting and studying photography with the legendary Alexei Brodovich, who was a photographic guru and mentor to such great photographers as Richard Avedon, Irving Penn, and Diane Arbus. While employed as an art director, Art Kane was studying and went back to school at the New School and was studying with Brodovich and shooting personal stuff. One example we'll see a little bit later, but in fact, so 3 years before Harlem, 1958, Art Kane's first photo, Art Kane had shot the cover of Errol Garner's Concert by the Sea, which at the time was, I think, one of the, if not the biggest selling album in jazz at the time. It's not a performance photo. Well, Art Kane never really did performance photos. It's actually probably a vacation photo and it's my mom on the cover. It's my mom. Got to give my props to my mom. But getting back to this photograph, so Art Kane's restless. He wants to make a transition. The word on the street in New York City was that Esquire magazine was planning a big issue devoted to jazz. And so my dad thought if he could come up with a crazy idea, something really outrageous like this, and pitch it to the editors at Esquire, that it could be a splashy way to launch his career. So he marched into the offices of editor Harold Hayes and art director Robert Benton, who went on to become a rather accomplished film director himself, and pitched this idea for this group portrait. They said, great, let's book a studio. We'll book a big studio. My dad was like, no, we're not going to book a studio. This has to be on location, and it has to be on location in Harlem because Harlem is where jazz has its home in New York City, and it actually is home to many of the artists who ended up being in the photograph. So at that point, apparently Benton and Hayes got a little nervous because of all of the things that can go wrong with a location shoot, not the least of which being rain. As we go through a bit of the PowerPoint, you'll see this an image of Jimmy Rushing carrying an umbrella, which would indicate to me that it might have rained, and also the overcast. But anyway, fate had it that it didn't, and so they set out a call to round up musicians, and you said you heard about it through Nat Hentoff. Yeah, and others were, record company executives, agents, union reps, and then there's one great story that I'll tell you a little bit later on. I'll start flashing through. These are some of the contact sheets, and of course, each photo shoot has its one classic shot, and in the case of this one, it's frame number 7. So
Do you have a sense for what made Art choose that particular location? Because it's beautifully framed.
Yeah, I think that location was chosen for its proximity to the train, the subway and the train station, and also it's 17 East 126th Street, so it's very centrally located, and the building itself has very nice tonal facades. It's a northern side of the street for southern exposure, so for good light, and although we will see as we advance through it that there in fact was a second location. We'll take a look at that in a minute. So these images from these contact sheets and all these images are in the book for further study, and it's just interesting to see that there were two formats. There's a 35 millimeter format, which in fact was the image that made the cut, and then this 120 film, which was probably like a Mamiya camera. At the time, my dad didn't actually have any cameras of his own. He was borrowing stuff from friends and had an assistant who didn't really know what he was doing and kind of botched loading the film, and it's kind of amazing they managed to pull this off. So this photograph is taken by the great bassist Milt Hinton, who's one of the musicians in the photograph. Milt himself is a very accomplished photographer who has some books out as well of incredible photographs of his experience on tour and in recording studios. And this shows my dad, Art Kane, standing at the top of the stairs, like kind of about to flail his arms and ask people to maybe get ready for the photo. It's also of note that on the street, the woman standing just to the left of the staircase is Milt Hinton's wife, Mona Hinton. And you can see she's holding in her hands a Super 8 camera. And the footage that she shot that day with the Super 8 camera was the genesis for Gene Bach's film, A Great Day in Harlem, which had been just sort of forgotten about and living in her basement of her home in Queens. And Gene Bach, the producer of the film, was having dinner with Milt and Mona Hinton one evening, and Mona said, I was cleaning out the basement and I found this Super 8 footage from you that day. You know that photograph with when all the musicians came together? And Gene Bach was like, well, we have to see it. And that was the genesis for the documentary. I think here is editor from Esquire, Harold Hayes, standing halfway up the stairs with the jacket draped over his shoulder. And we don't know exactly who many of the other people are. But we love to see some of these outtakes as the day begins to unfold. And here you have, on the right, you have Duke Ellington's drummer, Sonny Greer, leaning out of the car and shaking hands with the great stride pianist, Lucky Roberts. On the left is the absolutely incomparable Mary Lou Williams. And up above, Gene Krupa seems to be leaning in to say hi to somebody. It was just, must have been amazing seeing everybody show up. And did you get there early, Benny, or were you there when everybody was already there?
I wasn't there when they were at the first location. I don't know why. I guess Nat told me to come at the time when they were at the second location. But when I got there, like I said, I was just expecting to stand there for 5 or 6 minutes and click, and that was it. But when I got there, I saw all of my heroes, all the luminaries. I couldn't believe it. Had anything like this ever happened before? All these high-ranking musicians early in the morning together. I mean, it was like a dream. And when your father said, go up on the stairs, I guess I was an eager beaver. I ran up to the top.
Yes, you are well positioned in there. When there you are, the lower left frame, there's Benny in the right-hand corner.
And your father, he was so patient. You know, the thing that kept getting in the way, your father was trying to get everybody together, of course, and so many musicians being there like that, and you hadn't seen one another in so long, so conversations were here and there. Bill, what happened to so-and-so? When is the last time and your father, he was so patient, trying to get everybody together. But the thing that kept interrupting that click, there was a bar on the corner on Lenox Avenue, and the guys kept disappearing at that bar. So it took a while.
It took a while to get everyone together.
Yeah.
Yeah. And here's a great, great shot of Thelonious Monk. And can we all just say that those are the coolest bamboo shades we've ever seen? Wow.
He always had those bamboo shades.
Wow. And I think that's Vic Dickinson behind him, and Lester Young.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So these pairings of musicians and sort of remarkable. One of the many remarkable things about this photograph is how cross-generational in jazz it is. I mean, you have people like artists like Willie the Lion Smith and Lucky Roberts, on the same set with the Thelonious Monk. It's really it's just remarkable. You have drummers from Zutty Singleton, from Louis Armstrong's Hot Fives and Sevens, in the same place with Joe Jones and Gene Krupa. It's very, very representing so many generations of jazz. It's really remarkable.
You mentioned Willie the Lion Smith, and I remember Willie the Lion Smith. I told you the guys were disappearing in the bar, but Willie was there all the time. And when the final picture was taken, the only one missing, Willie the Lion Smith. He was at the bar.
It's true.
He didn't make the photograph.
It's true. It's true. Yeah, the people say, yes, there's 58 people in the photograph. Well, there were 58 musicians there. 57 made it to the actual frame. Yeah, and Willie is in all of the other configurations and just missed that one. It's really a shame.
Yeah.
Sort of fascinated by this picture showing the horse-drawn cart going by, and imagining that commerce in New York City still being conducted with the horse-drawn car. And there were actually a few horse-drawn carts going by on the street. Here's the image I was talking about with Jimmy Rushing holding the umbrella. So every time I see that, I go, yeah, I guess it maybe could have rained that day. And he's talking to Joe Jones and a young drummer, Eddie Locke. And I'm going to go ahead and jump in with Eddie Locke's story. Eddie Locke was a young drummer who had just hit town. And Eddie told me this story at the opening of the film, the premiere of the film, Great Day in Harlem, in '95. He said that he hadn't heard about it, this thing, until one day he was picking up his son at nursery school, and his son was in nursery school with my older brother, Anthony. So my mom and Eddie Locke were waiting online to pick up their kids and got into a friendly conversation, as parents do, talking about their lives. And my mom said, well, what do you do? And he said, I'm a jazz drummer. And she said, oh, this weekend, my husband is doing this picture for Esquire. They put an open call out for all the musicians. You should go. And so she gave him the details with the address and the time, and he told me that he showed up there and came around the corner and saw, as Benny has said, he saw all of his heroes there, Thelonious Monk and Lester Young and Coleman Hawkins and Dizzy Gillespie and Art Blakey, and he said that his knees started knocking, and he was like, what am I doing here? And he nearly turned around and ran away. But when he noticed his friend Horace Silver, who he's standing next to in the final frame, he said, well, okay, I'm going to go over there. But here we have him hanging out. Must have been quite a thrill for him to hang out with Joe Jones. And so this photo, I marked it in a red on the sides to point out it's a different location. Notice that the building is a little bit different. The shades are drawn, the window details are different, and in fact, this location is a block away at 54 East 126th Street, which is between Madison and Park. The actual location being 17 East 126th, between 5th and Madison. And it's just, I think that my father must have just wanted to try northern and or southern exposure, and or just try the different facades. But for me, it was fascinating. I never really realized that there was this other location until we took this deep dive into the edit. And there you are, Benny, looking very, very handsome. And you next to Sonny Rollins. I think it's also remarkable that you are the two who are still with us today, and thank you for that. But yeah, here in this one you can see it's, oh, sorry, I said 54, and it's actually 52. Or is it 54? I can't see. Anyway, it's 50-something. And Dizzy Gillespie at the top of the stairs looks like he's having a good laugh. And I'm glad he didn't fall off the edge of the balcony there.
What was the difference in the times of the two photos?
It's hard to say this. You mean what time of day?
Oh, this site and the other site.
It's hard to know which one came first. I have a feeling that maybe this one was earlier, so I would say. But Benny, the whole thing was wrapped up in about 2-3 hours, you think, or maybe?
I have a feeling this was the second location, because if it had been a location after this, I would have been at that, and I wasn't there.
Right.
It didn't happen. It dispersed after this.
Ah, right. What's going on? Here we go. You got Stuff Smith, a great violinist, and Coleman Hawkins up front. I think Coleman Hawkins must have been the main man there, wouldn't you say?
Oh, he was my hero. Yeah. As I look, boy, it brings back so many memories. It's 60 years ago?
Yeah.
But as I look, it was yesterday. It's something, yeah.
Is that Oscar Pettiford with the rolled-up newspaper?
That's right, that's him. And I didn't know these fellows then, but as time went by, I knew most of them, yeah.
Pee Wee Russell is in the second row, or the third row.
Yeah, oh boy.
There's Sonny Greer again.
Right.
Greer again, yeah.
Buster Bailey, oh boy.
Charles Mingus is, yeah. Pee Wee Russell, yeah. Mentioning this, that of 60 years ago, so that was the genesis for creating the book, was to celebrate the 60th anniversary of the photograph, which actually happened last year. And the great Italian photographer and an editor and gallerist, Guido Harari, contacted me about creating the book, and so Guido and Harari, his wife Christina Pelissaro, and the designer Anna Fassato at Wall of Sound Editions, worked together with me to create this book and do the edit. And working with them was a pleasure. The book is really beautifully designed, and and a pleasure to hold in your hand. Here you have Willie the Lionsmith and Lucky Roberts sitting on the stoop next door, and also just I kind of get obsessed with some of the style and fashion we look at in these photographs, and the guy in the lower right picture sitting to the left of the stairs, the left of Lucky Roberts, for 1958, that's a pretty modern look that guy is wearing, right? With those cargo pants and the bracelet on. I mean, it's like, that guy is pretty fashion forward for 1958. Yeah. So, Mary Lou Williams and Thelonious Monk. It's notable that in the final picture, Thelonious Monk is standing next to Mary Lou Williams and Marion McPartland. And I mean, part of the legend with Thelonious Monk was that he was late arriving because he was choosing his wardrobe very carefully. And he's wearing a light-colored jacket because he figured most people would be wearing dark jackets. and that he would stand out if he had on a light-colored jacket. But he also, I think, strategically said that he stood next to Mary Lou Williams and Marion McPartland because more people would look at him if he was standing next to the two beautiful women in the photograph as well. Here, Gene Krupa really seems quite taken with Roy Eldridge's jacket. And that is quite a nice fabric on that jacket, I have to say. So Benny, was it hard? It must have been hard getting it organized with all the people saying hello and talking to each other and catching up, right?
It took a long time. It was not like taking an ordinary picture. And your father, boy, there was something different about this guy because he never got excited. He never raised his voice.
Well, I think that's, you're one of the only people who ever described Art Kane as being patient. And I attribute it to a couple of things. First of all, it was his immense respect for the artists, his heroes, really, and heroines that were there in front of him, and this notion that this crazy idea that he had come up with had now come to life and was happening. And so it was a combination, I think, of respect and also just it being that early in his career. I think later on he was a little less patient with some of his subjects, but yeah, I think in this case he was just in awe of the people that he was there photographing. This is one is remarkable again. Also, this you can tell from the configuration. It's very close to the actual image, the final image. You can see Benny, there you are next to Art Farmer at the top of the stairs, and again another horse-drawn cart going by. So I know that they had a permit for the street, but they hadn't closed the street down. We see taxis going by, we see horses and buggies going by, and it's kind of fascinating that nowadays they would shut the street down and, they'd close the street down for a lot less than something like this. So, but it's remarkable how things were more casual, once upon a time. And I think that's part of the magic that happened that day was, it wasn't all buttoned up. It was something that was really unfolding in real time. And with distractions.
Yeah, I keep thinking about those kids on the curb. Time has made many of them grandparents.
Yes, indeed. So at this moment, I think what we're seeing here, this is another Milt Hinton photograph, and again, you can see my dad. I think he's eyeing the stairs here and thinking it's about time now to start asking people to start moving up. So he had famously taken a copy of the New York Times and rolled it into a megaphone shape and imploring people, all of the great artists there to start moving up into the steps. This illustration is taken from one of the two children's books written about this day, which I love. This one's from a book called Jazz Day, and shows that moment with the New York Times saying, please, everybody start moving up into the steps.
But they couldn't hear him in the bar.
Yeah. So then people did start moving up, and one of the things that's remarkable is how so many of the drummers sort of came into one place there. You've got Krupa and George Wetling and Zutty Singleton and Sonny Greer and Art Blakey's up there too. And
right.
And I think the inclusion of the kids was really important to making this a real neighborhood event. That was part of the power of this, that it just was real. A couple of points, some of the other art director at Esquire and other people from the magazine were saying, get those kids out of here, and my father was like, absolutely not. The kids stay. The kids have to stay. The only artist I had ever heard about that wasn't happy about it actually was Lester Young. And my dad took Lester Young a couple of days after this up to Rye Playland for a photo shoot, and Lester was like apparently told my father, you shouldn't have had those kids in the photograph. That took away from the gravity, from the seriousness. And my father said, Mr. Young, I respectfully disagree. I think for me, the kids were really something special and represent the future in the next generation. And everybody else seemed to think it was an okay idea to keep the kids there. Yeah, Coleman Hawkins. Yeah, here's the drummer's corner again, with Joe Jones, Gene Krupa, Sonny Greer, and George Wetling.
Can you talk a little bit about what these images say about the sense of community among musicians?
Well, I mean, I think the fact that everybody, turned out that day was, I don't think there was any money involved. There was no catering. There was no location vans. It was a real celebration of their art form, of jazz, and I think that really speaks to that.
And they paid their own bills at the bar. Yeah.
Here we see Dizzy Gillespie brought a camera too. I'd like to have seen some of his shots. And is that Art Blakey? That's Art Blakey behind Dizzy.
Behind him, that's Art, yeah. The biggest liar I ever met in my life.
But boy, did he have that press roll. Holy cow.
Oh, boy, when I joined him, he usually made the press roll 2 bars before the new chorus. And when the new chorus began, it began with a crash. And I guess he was trying to send me a message. Instead of starting the drum roll 2 bars before the new chorus, he started 4 bars. And he got louder and louder, and I wound up pantomiming. And then when the new chorus began, it began with the crash, and it was usually 1 crash, and the chorus would go on. But he added a 2nd crash, and a 3rd crash, and a 4th. Nobody could hear me. And then I heard this voice come from the drums, "Get up out of that hole." I had to learn to play a little differently with Art Blakey. And when I mentioned that to Freddie Hubbard, he said, "You too?"
So he was a taskmaster, huh?
But that was the best experience of my life ever, playing with Art Blakey.
Oh, well, you helped him raise the bar too with your compositions. I mean.
Oh, when I mentioned Blues March, he thought I was crazy.
So what was the reaction from Esquire to this image?
Well, I think they loved it. It ran as a spread in that golden age of jazz issue, and it also included these other individual portraits that we're going to look at later of Louis Armstrong and Duke Ellington and Lester Young, it was the big bang for Art Kane's career as a photographer. Yes, but Benny, you've mentioned too, like in the nature of a magazine, a lot of people didn't keep them, right? Didn't you?
Yeah, that's what happened to me. You're like all magazines, you read it and then you put it aside and you forget about it, and when your wife is cleaning it, it goes out in the trash. And years went by, and then it became famous. And Bruce Lundvall was the president of Columbia at that time, before he was president at Blue Note. And I lamented that I'd thrown it away because he had a big picture on the wall like this. And I told him I was so sorry that I'd thrown the magazine away. I lamented so much about that. And 2 weeks later, the bell rang and the postman delivered a picture like this from Bruce to me.
Oh, that was nice.
Yeah.
Oh, very sweet. Here it's all starting to come together. This is a different format. This is the 120 medium format, and you can see it's just about starting to happen. The kids sitting on the curb famously were teasing Count Basie. Here you see he's hiding his hat behind him. Apparently one kid kept stealing his hat, well, like kind of grabbing his hat and putting it on and running. Count Basie would go grab his hat back, and then they went on and on until, for the classic image, you know, Basie sat down at the curb with the kids and held onto his hat. Well, if you can't beat him, join him. And this frame is notable also because the musicians were actually asked not to bring their instruments. And people have said, what if they all brought their instruments and played? Well, I think, you know, Art Kane wanted it to be about them as people and didn't really want the distraction of other. But here, Rex Stewart actually has his horn out and seems to be playing, which is kind of cool. And then this is a screen grab from Mona Hinton's Super 8 footage. And it shows my dad crossing the street. I think you can see from the configurations that it's getting close to the final frame. And also just fun to see color and see, you know, Marion McPartland's beautiful yellow dress, and Mary Lou Williams has that pink shawl on, and Maxine Sullivan's dress, you know. And here's young, inexperienced Art Kane with a little borrowed 35 millimeter camera saying, okay, please, are we ready? Everybody ready to do this? And then, boom, the shot, the actual shot. And you know,
How did he get everybody to face the camera at once? Although they didn't, you can see some are not facing the
Well,
camera.
the only one that's not facing the camera is Roy Eldridge.
And Mary Lou Williams is not.
And he's
facing
looking at Dizzy Gillespie with his tongue hanging out.
yeah. Oh, yeah, Roy Eldridge complained about that in the film. He said, Dizzy was always joking around with me, and I'm the only one who can't see my face because, you know. But, you know, when you have a crowd of people this big, you have to, you know, you've got to choose your best frame. And there's never going to be one where everybody, I think this one's pretty good, you know, for the number of people who are face forward and everybody looking really good and focused. And, you know, that is the magic shot. It's just the one, the Count Basie's posture with his 1 foot out. And, you know, I love the one kid off to the left that's cut out, because in every great picture there's also this wonderful when there's some element of imperfection, just to remind you that there's nothing really perfect in this world. And yeah, so that's the classic. And then the book features this wonderful legend that points out who everybody is. And then, so here's some of the peripheral material around it. That's the cover of the original Esquire issue, Golden Age of Jazz. That's how the photograph appeared, which is kind of strange how they cropped out G.G. Grice at the left, you know? I mean, I don't know why they didn't shove the whole thing over a little more. It's a total mystery to me. I think it didn't want to run the main group of people into the gutter, is probably what happened there, yeah. So, and to the top left is the cover of Concert by the Sea, which is the Mythbuster. Hi, Mom. Yeah. These are the other Art Kane portraits that ran in that same issue. And these are much more exemplary of where Art Kane went, was to go on, and where his brilliance really began to unfold as a conceptual photographer. In the case of the Louis Armstrong picture, you know, it was a pretty simple concept. Louis had that great song about a rocking chair, and so my dad wanted to take Louis Armstrong out of his usual environments. He didn't want to shoot. He said, there've been enough photos of Louis Armstrong playing and performing or in clubs. I want to take him to a place of uncompromising beauty and show a man at rest and at peace after having created a musical revolution. So he flew Louis Armstrong to Death Valley, and apparently Louis Armstrong did not like to fly. He didn't want to get into this plane, particularly not without his wife, Lucille, but the plane only had 4 seats, 4-seat Cessna, so there was only room for Louis Armstrong, the pilot, Art Kane, and the rocking chair. And somehow or another, my dad convinced Louis Armstrong to do it, and away they went and took this beautiful, and the sun lining up so perfectly as it was setting with Louis Armstrong's eye, and it's just very beautiful. It's a little saccharine, but absolutely gorgeous. To the right is Charlie Parker's tombstone, an empty sax case. My dad was sort of taken with how the saxophone case mirrored the shape of the tombstone, and he removed the saxophone from the case just to make the point that the bird had flown. To the right there is Duke Ellington on the A train that he immortalized in his classic song. And in this case, my dad had the New York City subway system shut down for about 20 minutes and crawled onto the tracks to get Duke Ellington in the front of the A train. And kind of amazing to imagine that happening. And I'm glad he didn't hit the third rail while he was out of it. And to the left is Lester Young, photographed in a funhouse mirror at Rye Playland. And I think what he was just thinking about how Prez would stretch notes out and his particularly interesting and unique style of playing. This is a collection of some of the homages to Harlem 1958. There's more all the time. You've had Great Day in hip hop, Great Day in klezmer. Down there at the bottom middle is at the Eldridge Street Synagogue. You've got great days in Atlanta, great days on Maxwell Street in Chicago, Detroit. It's almost become a franchise of, there's a kind of an unabated obsession. There's, my understanding is there's a stained glass window somewhere, and also a life-size photorealist pencil drawing. I haven't seen those, but I've heard of them. But most impressive is Gordon Parks, who himself is a brilliant American photographer and filmmaker. And Gordon loved the photograph and created his own version of it in 1998 for XXL magazine, and he did the greatest day in hip-hop history. And that's the same building, and there are actually so many artists there that they're spilling out over into the two steps on either side. And also this image indicates what happens when you don't have the indirect light. Here, this is clearly a bright sunny day, so it's a different quality to it. And also, you can see that it took them a while to get this together because the shadow is coming up. If they hadn't shot this right when they did, the shadows as the sun's setting behind the building would have started to obscure the faces of the artists in the front row. So
Jonathan, didn't you take a picture similar to this?
I did, Benny. Last year, to celebrate the 60th anniversary of Harlem, 1958, I did my own homage to it, which we'll look at here.
That's it.
And mine is called A Great Day in Queens, and it's not about musicians. It's a celebration of immigration and cultural diversity in America. I live in the borough of Queens in New York City, which is the most culturally diverse place on planet Earth. The city of London claims that crown, but it's actually Queens. We put out a call to get as many people from as many different countries as we can to celebrate what's really great about America, which is our cultural diversity here. And we got about 136 people from 66 countries. And so that's my spin on my dad's picture. And for me, it's a pushback against some of the very unfortunate dialogue that's coming out of.
I love that composition, though. Composition is beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, well. Yeah. That's right. So, and we chose the Unisphere, and I brought in some choir riser to create the steps. So, yeah, thanks for mentioning that, Benny. These are a couple of the photos of the two children's books dedicated to the Jazz Day, Sweet Music in Harlem. And I love this spread here. Again, it's just a great illustration of the day, and it's wonderful seeing the image being introduced to a younger generation. The artist really gave my dad quite a sway back in that picture. I don't know, but it's pretty good stuff. So this is my dad's portrait of Aretha Franklin, shot for Esquire magazine in 1967. Again, showing my dad's riffing as a conceptual photographer. He was pondering how to illustrate Aretha's roots as a gospel artist. So he thought, well, maybe if I slow my shutter speed way down and wave my camera in a circular motion, I might be able to create halos with the light in her eyes. In those days before digital photography, you wouldn't know if your experiment was going to work until the film came back from the lab. But in this case, it did work. And even though the image is a bit abstract, I think it's just absolutely poignant, way to describe Aretha's background and the fact that everything coming together, even with her looking up at the time. When we lost our beloved Queen of Soul last year, Billboard loved that image, but they thought it was too abstract for the cover, so I took a quick look through the archive, and even though my dad did not like his outtakes, and he probably wouldn't love every picture that we have in this book, sorry, Dad. In this case of Harlem 1958, we overrule Art Kane's obsession with only showing his classic and his premium choices. And again, with Aretha, I found this other picture. It did have one of his grease pencil marks around it, and I think he coaxed a really amazing look out of the Queen of Soul, kind of a Mona Lisa smile she's got going there. These are from an essay on civil rights that he did for Look magazine in 1965, and they are an example of a technique that he came up with he called it the sandwich. He would layer images together to create visual metaphors, being the distress flag. And so he photographed the young man in his studio with the flag and layered it upside down with the image of water. And between that and this one, which also ran, and they helped make it easier for people in America to understand what was going on in 1965, because sometimes an image can say so much more than 1,000 words in a statement. This is the boxer Joe Louis, and when Joe Louis arrived at Art Kane's studio, my dad asked him to keep his coat on. He said, "It's all about your hands." So he used a wide-angle lens, a 24-millimeter lens, to photograph Joe Louis and those powerful fists that just made him the champion. This photograph is a film still from a film called Pete Kelly's Blues, and it was the directorial debut of Jack Webb, of all things. But these were 7 brothers who were extras on the set, and so the title of this image is 7 Brothers. I'm just checking time. Okay, we're doing good. This is another Art Kane sandwich image of Louis Armstrong in Death Valley. And a lot of people think it's like a reflection, but in fact it's 2 images, book matched together, and they give a feeling of the passage of time. And this is Wynton Marsalis, photographed from the session for the album Think of One. And that's Claudia McNeil and Alvin Ailey, was photographed for the Broadway show Tiger, Tiger, Burning Bright, for the Playbill magazine cover. Whitney Houston for Harper's Bazaar. And this photograph I shot this for the New York Daily News for a story they were doing on the upcoming anniversary. They asked me to go back and photograph the building as it appears today. I brought my dad's vintage aluminum tilt-all tripod to get a little bit of Art Kane mojo into the picture. And everything was going okay, but it was just fine until the woman walked by with her stroller, and when the baby peeked out and looked at me, that's my shot. And because that's, for me, where it all came together, the past, the present, and the baby representing the future, as the children who sat on the curb 60 years ago had done for my dad's classic photograph. That's Art Kane, just saying hi to everybody, and there we have it. That's our shot.
So let me ask you about this book. It's a very handsome book. Lots of outtakes. How did you choose what would go into the book?
Well, to tell you the truth, it's virtually the whole shoot.
Really?
It was more a matter of sequencing it than editing. It's virtually the whole shoot. And I think we wanted to be as completist as possible for this book. Again, my dad didn't care much about his outtakes, but this photograph overrules even the artist's own vision, because this photograph it's as much as it belongs to Art Kane, it belongs to the 58 men and women who showed up that day, including Mr. Golson here, and made this photo. So it's the nature of that made me want to be as completist as possible. And so yeah, the book is beautifully designed again by Guido Harari, Anna Fasada, and Christina Pelissaro at Wallace Sound, and it was just a real honor to get to make it, and beautiful forewords by Benny and by Quincy Jones. Yeah, there's a lot of great material in there.
I think now would be an appropriate time to take any questions that you might have for either Mr. Kane or Mr. Golson. And we have a microphone in the back.
Thank you. In one of the images on the screen, we saw a color photograph that came from a video of some kind. Was there a color still photograph?
Not
Are there
that I know
any?
of. No, I don't. Not the only other photographs I've ever seen were by the bassist Milt Hinton, and he was also shooting in black and white at the time. I don't know what kind of film Dizzy Gillespie had in his camera. I don't know that his film survived. The guy, I think his name is Mike Lipskin, who brought Willie the Lion Smith there, and he did some photographs also, but as far as I know, they were all black and white.
So do you know what kind of film, the make of the film? Do you know what ASA that film was?
I'm going to guess that it was from the graining. I'm thinking it was probably either Plus X or Tri-X film, which I think is Tri-X is 400, yeah, and Plus X is 100, yeah. So but from the grain, I'm guessing, and probably because the day was overcast and they wanted something a little faster, I'm going to guess it was Tri-X.
You mentioned the children in the photograph. Over the years, has anyone tried to track them down to find out where they are today?
Yeah, that's a great question. As far as I know, nobody knows. There was no record keeping done in those days. Nowadays, if children were to appear in a photograph, their parents would all have to sign a model release, and in those days, they're just neighborhood kids showed up. A guy came to one event that we did at Rizzoli Books in New York and said that he was one of the kids in the photograph, but he was too young. I think it didn't seem possible. Now, one of the kids is the son of Taft Jordan Jr., right? Yeah. So, but yeah, nobody actually knows who the kids are or has any way to find them. I think in the Gene Box documentary, there's one, but it might be actually it's Taft Jordan's son who's in there.
It
Yeah,
was.
so, yeah.
Mr. Golson, did you get a sense that people came from home or they came from work?
I don't have my hearing aids in, and there's too much bass on the mic. Can you tell me what he said?
Did people come from home or come from work? The musicians who showed up, yeah.
For this?
Yeah.
I think they got up from the job that they played the night before. That's what happened. All of us.
So you maybe were home for a couple of hours of sleeping.
Yeah, they weren't coming from work. They didn't play that late. No, they got up.
Hi, you had mentioned that, of course, Mr. Golson and Sonny Rollins are survivors, or still living from the photograph. Are there any other musicians from the photograph who are still with us?
No.
Excuse me. I was going to ask, how did he get such control? I noticed he had shot a couple of frames before he got this particular shot, because to have the kids in the type of control that he has them in, to get the background, to get all the musicians in one mood, it must have took him quite a few frames.
Yes, for sure.
Okay.
For sure, yeah. I mean, that's, you can see that there's a lot of clicking going on, to arrive at that frame. And trying with different cameras as well. So there's the medium format shots, which is this same configuration. But yeah, I think it was just a combination of knowing that it was the right moment, and within the right, couple of minutes, and then after that, that was the frame where the magic happened. Yeah.
Do we know what Gigi Grice is holding under his arm? I've always wondered about that.
Sorry?
What is Gigi Grice holding under his arm? Do we know?
Oh, well, I don't know. There might be some scores or something, I
That's
think.
always what I suspected. Mr. Golson, do you have any idea? Do you remember what Gigi might have brought with him to the
Gigi Grice
photo?
has holding under his arm some, looks like maybe some scores or something?
Any day, at any time, at any hour, you always saw Gigi Grice like that. He had music going on all the time. Yeah. He even did some symphonic scores that no one ever heard.
Who else has a question?
Yeah, this gentleman over there.
I love the picture. I'm just thinking about how did the young kids get chosen, and would the impact of the picture have been different if you would have maybe integrated some little girls in there?
Yeah, well, somebody just brought that up in Chicago last week. I think that 1958, well, first of all, they were all with the exception of the kid sitting closest to Count Basie, who's the son of Taft Jordan. The rest of them were neighborhood kids that were just kind of hanging around and watching this, and as they started to, participate and be around, there was some effort to shoo them away, and my father was like, no, the kids are really making this very special, and so specifically asked them to stay there. The thing about why there's no girls, it's such a hard question but my guess is that just, maybe in those days in the 50s, it was just boys who got to run around and, and go outside and be, maybe the girls were... I don't think that if there were girls there that they would have been asked not to be there. I think that it's just one of those things that, that just happened to be a bunch of boys hanging around that day. So,
well, I too want to say it's a great photograph and a great memorial from history. And I also want to say thank you also very much for bringing this to the Library of Congress and allowing us to participate with you this evening. Has there been a reissue of the Esquire magazine?
no, there hasn't actually. It's available. People can track it down on eBay from time to time. But yeah, no, they never re-released it. Last year it came out in a Esquire did a kind of a look back at highlights of different decades, and the image ran there, but not in its original context. It's a great idea. Somebody should really do it sometime. Yeah, great idea. I like it. I like it. Speaking of petitions, actually, there is Community Board 17 that represents this neighborhood in Harlem has put forth the idea of renaming Fifth Avenue and 126th Street as Art Kane Harlem 1958 Place. And it's getting some traction, and it looks like it might actually happen in the next year or so. So we're just kind of,
Who else has a question? No? In that case, I will turn to Mr. Golson and ask you about the film you made with Steven Spielberg, The Terminal, and your reaction to how it came out.
I was in Europe, and I got a call from the office, and the call said, Steven Spielberg wants to know if you're interested in being in a picture that he's doing. And I told the office, no. And they couldn't understand why, and then I had to explain to them. Over the years, I'd gotten many calls, to be in commercials, and you show up at the commercials, and it's like a cattle call, 50 people for the same part, and I never got picked. And I thought it was that kind of thing where he wants me to come in with the crowd and they'd pick this one or that one, and I wouldn't get picked again. And they said to me, no, he wants you. And that was a little strange. So when I got into what it was all about, I said, okay. And then what they did, they sent me, from Los Angeles, they sent me a script that they wanted me to read at a studio in downtown New York City. So I went to the studio, and they set the cameras up, and I said the words, and they said, fine, good. But they saw the expression on my face and wanted to know, what did that reflect? I said, a real musician wouldn't say it that way. And so they said, okay, let's do it again and say it the way a musician would say it. And so I did it, and they sent it to him, and they said, great. Now, when we got together, I still didn't know what it was all about. And I found out that it was about this picture, and who was that? Who was it? Tom Hanks, that's right, sorry. Tom Hanks, in the picture, Tom Hanks' father was a collector of autographs and photographs, and he had this picture here, and he got everybody's autograph on this picture except Benny Golson. And that's what the picture was about. And his father kept these autographs in a coffee can. And Catherine Zeta-Jones said to him, what's in this can? And he said, my father. And what he was talking about with these autographs. And then he explained to her that he was trying to get my autograph, and that's what the picture was all about. And then I asked Stephen, why did you pick me out of all these musicians? And then I got surprised in my life. He said, when I was a college student, I used to come and hear you play. That's what it was all about. Wow. And then while we were filming it, I got another surprise. Well, I got a few surprises. But during the break, Tom Hanks leaned over and said to me, Benny, you don't know what an honor it is for me to be doing this scene with you. Tom Hanks is saying that to me. I couldn't believe it. Tom Hanks and Steven Spielberg are jazz fans. That's what it's all about. And I still get emails from Tom. I get emails from him all the time. And when I met his wife, she had been reading the emails that we'd been transporting from one another, and so she knew me through him. And when I saw her for the first time, she came up to me, Rita's her name, and gave me a big fat kiss. Yeah.
So I believe we have copies of this book for sale on that table over there, and our guests are willing to and happy to sign them if you'd like. And so for now, I would say thank you, one and all, for coming tonight, especially on a World Series night.
Yeah, especially tonight.
Yeah. And a great pleasure to meet Renee and Carol. So thank you for that. So nice to see so many friends here. Thank you to the Library of Congress for putting this together. Thank you all, and have a good evening.
Very nice. Thank you so much.
Are you kidding?